This podcast deals with themes, languages, and situations that may not be suitable for young audiences. If you're under the age of 18, parental guidance isn't going to help you here.
Welcome to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. I'm Drew.
I am Jobim.
And I'm Sab. Hi.
Oh my God, we forgot to take you out before we introduced you. But anyway, you're here.
Hi.
Hello.
Anyway,
Welcome back. We're excited, very, very excited to have Sab back on the show.
Yes.
He was such a fantastic guest the last time, and really looking forward to tonight's episode.
Yes, so tonight's amazing guest is historian, sex comedian, and the host behind WhatsApp, Araling Panlipunan Rebooted, Sab Schnabel. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, and you're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So this week, along with Sab, we're going to take a peek behind the curtain of some major extramarital affairs. Some of the other woman, the other man, my husband's boyfriend's cousin's lover. This is the history of mistresses and mastresses. For part one, we'll talk about the infamous kabits throughout history, including the mistress who won Anne Boleyn, Madame de Pompadour, and one of history's most famous male lovers, Gregory Potemkin. So some trigger warnings here. Obviously, we're going to talk about cheating. We'll also have some trigger warnings for murder and violence. If you are listening live and like what you hear, please join the discussion by leaving a comment below, and we'll get to them as the show goes on. Now, on to the discussion. So, Sab, before we start on our rundown of some of history's most important kabets and lovers, I want to ask, why? Why mistresses? Why kabets?
Well, we were trying to think about what would be like a really good thing to talk about. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is just like, we always talk about marriage like it's happily ever after, especially for kings and queens and princes and whatever, right? Like it always seems like you marry the king, you marry the prince, and then it's done. You get to be happy forever or whatever. But mostly marriages between royalty are just like arrangements made by parents for land and land rights. So they're not really romantic things. They're just contracts. And so throughout the ages, like love has sort of prevailed in like different situations, because sometimes our understanding of a word like marriage is something completely different from their understanding of a word like marriage. And that's something I like to talk about a lot when it comes to history, is like our sensibilities are completely different from other people's sensibilities. History is a foreign country, and you don't know the culture. And so you sort of have to learn it. And that's what I love. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We as a society have long looked down on kabets, like, kabit ka lang, I'm the official wife.
Legal wife.
Legal wife. Wasn't that the name of a teleserye or something?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But yeah, we look down a lot on these people because we have all these ideas about commitment, faithfulness, loyalty, and love, when there was a time in history when it was the mistress that you loved. In fact, Matt said, one of our customers said, basically, mistresses are for crazy stuff you can't do with your wife who you respect.
Or who you're in a marriage with because it's a business deal, sort of thing.
Yeah, like think about it like your wife is the person that you've sort of been told your whole life you have to marry her, like you're by your parent, like when you're put in the same crib as like your like other friends or whatever, and they're your parents are like, this is your friend, and you're just like, Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's just like pawns, and it's like a giant chess game of marriages. And so marriage just didn't have the same like love connotation, at least for royalty. Because like if you were lower class, you could get married for love because it's like, you don't have land anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about one of our first mistresses or mastresses for today?
Yeah. Okay. So we are like, first, let me go through the 6, because we're going to go through a couple of hundreds of years here of mistresses and mastresses, right? So I kind of, when Drew called me up and was like, all right, what do we want to do? And I was like, mistresses and mastresses. I immediately started going through all the ones I wanted to talk about, and there were so many.
Who are some of your honorable
Anne
mentions?
Boleyn.
So when we're talking like mistresses and mastresses for tonight's episode, we're not meaning specifically like infidelity, right? We're not meaning like people who were hidden away or kept secret. Some of these relationships were like out in the open.
Some of these relationships were official. Like for Madame de Pompadour, she was the official mistress of the king. Like if you go on Wikipedia, her occupation was chief mistress.
Right.
Like that's actually a role that you can have.
Like, that's how
normalized
was.
For this.
Yeah. So it's you have to be appointed, darling.
Right. Okay. It's a very different time, very different world.
Yeah. And so we're gonna start with Anne Boleyn. We're gonna go to Madame de Pompadour. We're gonna talk about Gregory Potemkin. We're gonna talk about 2 Chinese dowager empresses, Tu Ti and Tu An, Marilyn Monroe, and Dovey Beams. So those are the people we'll be talking about today. My honorable mentions were Monica Lewinsky and that girl who peed on Trump.
Stormy Daniels. There we go. I was trying to remember.
Stormy Daniels, yeah. But Monica Lewinsky is telling her own story, so
Yeah,
right,
that's true. She's coming out, I think, with she's producing something, a series where she gets to tell her own side of the story. So
it's showing now, so everybody check it out. Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes. It's pretty good.
Right. So tell us about our first mistress for today.
Our first mistress for today is Anne Boleyn. And we're calling her the mistress who won, because she's the one who made divorce a thing. And we'll go into that in a second. So she was born in 1501.
Harry chapter,
and she died in
mistress who won.
Yes. So she was born in 1501. She died in 1536. We're not going to do that many dates because I hate dates, and I think everybody hates dates. So instead, what we're going to do is go into just like the century, the 1500s. What were the Philippines doing in the 1500s? What were we doing around
getting
this time?
fucked?
Yeah, we were getting fucked by Magellan. That was the beginning of the Spanish 1521, right smack dab in the middle of this history. We are like getting fucked by the Spanish. But where are we in poofy dress history, which is how we're going to talk about Western history instead of dates? We're not in poofy dress yet. This is still flowy dress history.
Okay.
We're wearing petticoats and stays. We're not yet in corsets and poofy dresses.
So people haven't gotten hot yet.
Oh, people have gotten hot. You should watch The Tudors. And the girl they got Natalie Dormer to play Anne Boleyn.
Ooh.
Oh God, I love me some Natalie Dormer.
I'm sold.
Oh yeah, it's Jonathan Rhys-Meyers as Henry VIII. It's really hot.
Equally love me
and
some.
And they're
Jonathan
really hot. Actually, the reason that Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII kind of goes they permeate through the centuries is because they were kind of hot. Like their love was kind of hot. They loved each other. They were really
hot.
He was when he was younger. What? He just wasn't when he was older. Oh yeah. So okay. So this is the thing: is we're used to hearing about Henry VIII later in life when he's
fat,
fat, and he's got the leg thing. But we're talking about Henry VIII now in his 30s.
Was he hot? So was there a time when when you see old pictures of Mussolini, you're like young Mussolini could tear this up?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Henry VIII could get it. There is
Really?
a reason that he had 6 wives. He could get
it was
when
he was
first
like the monarch.
He was like Jack Nicholson of his time, hot when he was young, and then he just like, I can carry this hot attitude for the rest of my life and not stay hot. I can deteriorate this and stay Jack Nicholson.
Well, that's because he's the monarch. That is the monarch thing. Is like when you're the monarch, you can keep the hotness factor even like though you've stopped becoming hot. So Anne Boleyn was born to Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Boleyn. They come from a powerful family, but a noble family, not like a royal family. And so they were professional courtiers. So even before Anne Boleyn caught the eye of the king, her sister was one of the official mistresses.
Okay, so what is a family of courtiers? When you say a family of courtiers, what do you mean? Their family business was to get into being mistresses?
So like kind of their whole thing was like getting favors from the king. And one of the best ways to get like favors from the king was to like put eligible daughters in front of the king and be like, look, shiny mistress. Ooh, look, shiny.
So they're
give us
like
honors because we
socialites of the time.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Socializing.
Okay.
And so the king at this point, Henry VIII, is married to Catherine of Aragon, who is the like perfect queen. Like he was like, it's so hard to get rid of her because she was basically like super well connected. She was the princess of Spain. When she and Henry married, it like connected Britain to the continent, and it was a really, really big deal. And she was such a well-beloved figure. Her name is Catherine of Aragon. She was the daughter of Ferdinand Isabella. Like, this is like the paragon of royalty, as you know from 6. She's the paragon of royalty.
And she was Spanish, right?
And she was Spanish. But she was starting to hit menopause and she couldn't have any more children. And Henry didn't have an heir. And he only had a
male
girl.
heir. Yeah.
Yeah, he needed a male heir to let them. Yeah.
Not a single heir, honestly.
Oh my god.
So he needed a male heir.
Like neck deep in like heirs and things that like my brain that just went right over my head. So he needed an heir. And so he basically was like, all right. So he was kind of vulnerable, and Anne was like, hell yeah. She was really smart and she was really like good at being a courtier. So she sort of like caught his attention and then started to basically string him along, play him. She was really good at being like, come here. No. Bye-bye. Come here. No. Goodbye. And basically for ages they did, very coquettish. And for ages they did anything but, and everything but. And he would write her love letters where he talked about kissing her breasts and like, you know, like, and how much he missed her and how much he wanted to be with her. And she would like hold out and he would be like, just be my mistress because I can't divorce the queen. Just be my mistress. And then they fucking go all the way to the Pope to get dispensation to divorce Catherine because he needs an heir. And Anne finally gives in and gets pregnant. And so everyone's like, oh my God, she gets pregnant by Henry. It's going to be a thing. And it's a girl.
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh.
And that
the worst thing you can possibly do.
Yeah. The worst thing you could possibly do. And it's a girl. And that girl later becomes Queen Elizabeth. So like, haha, in the end, the greatest Tudor queen comes from Anne Boleyn.
Who was a mistress.
But
she really did win.
Illustrious. Her legacy is secure. But Anne Boleyn's coquettishness, while cute in a mistress, is not great in a wife. Because you could just imagine, like, he had the, like, perfect 1950s housewife before who was just, like, patient and serene and would, like look away whenever he would basically be flirting with all of her ladies in waiting because it's Henry VIII, virile, young, all of the ladies in waiting. And so Anne, who was well known for being, like, really cunning and really clever and really like dark and like interesting and like read books and stuff. Suddenly Henry's going after her lady in waiting, who's the like sweetest, blondest, like kind of a dumb blonde Jane Seymour. And she's like so jealous. And so his eye starts to wander. And now that Anne has like gotten him to divorce one queen, what's to stop him from divorcing another queen, right?
Ooh, right.
So she set a precedent. Yeah, because before it was like, no, but she's the queen. No matter what you do, she's the queen. But Anne kind of overthrew the queen. And so now she's the queen, but she doesn't have the same security because of her own machinations.
It's kind of like the idea that people have where it's like once a cheater is always a cheater. And like if they cheated on their wife with you, who's to say they won't cheat on you with the next one? And I guess like a lot of people when they're arguing against divorce in the current state, it's always like, oh well, then like, you know, people are not going to take marriage seriously and they're just going to keep getting divorced. And I'm like, that's not really a thing. But also you look at the first person who ever got divorced, and he got divorced 6 times. Well, not really divorced 6 times, but multiple times.
Some of those like beheadings.
He divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, died.
Survived.
That's the old. Oh yeah, sorry. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived.
I mean, she died eventually.
That's the old adage. Yeah. But yeah, so Anne started to feel the pressures of being queen and begins to miscarry the kids. So she's getting pregnant and she's starting to have miscarriages. And that is like the worst thing you could possibly do as a queen or a princess, because it's like, this is your job, is to have children. And if you're not having children right, then you're screwed. And so
the only thing worse because than being born a woman, being born dead.
I would actually think maybe at this point, the way that Henry VIII is thinking, it's like better dead than a woman, because he's really looking for that heir. Like he doesn't care really if he has daughters. Does he care?
He already has 2. No, he doesn't. He already has 2.
He's got kids, man.
He actually has a son, but yeah, he wants to fuck around, and he does.
He got the lady who had been, as far as he's concerned, had been like stringing him along, and that was her allure. Yeah. And then he finally has her, and you want what you can't have. Like, it's worse, but it's different. You know, I get that from Family Guy all the time. It's worse, but it's different. So he starts going after this blonde, ditzy. What was she? A chambermaid? Handmaiden?
No, she was a lady in waiting. She was a lady in waiting. So like, not a chamber.
There you go.
A lady in waiting is like a companion. You like hang out with the queen a lot. You're like there to do like errands and stuff for the queen. But you're not a chambermaid. Yeah, paid entourage.
Maid.
But you're like the entourage. It's not really paid. It's like an honorable thing to be, but you usually have an allowance.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Henry and Anne start going from being like those sweet, you know, like when a sweet couple, like a couple that's super into each other, start to break up and it's like really bad and stormy.
Yep.
This starts to happen to Anne and Henry. And so it's like, instead of just being like a regular, like, oh, it's like a shitty breakup, it's like a really shitty breakup. They're like screaming at each other. Anne is like, you don't love me. You're just letting anyone into your bedroom. And he's just like,
yeah,
because I'm the king, bitch.
What do you say to that? Like, it's factually correct.
Yeah. And there's nothing to say. And so they're just screaming at each other. And so finally he gets tired of her, and she's found guilty of cuckolding the king with a number of courtiers, including her brother.
What?
Wait, she fucked her own brother.
That's what they say. They say that she fucked her own brother trying to get a son. And then like it would be the king's son because no one else would have fucked her.
I wouldn't put it past Henry, because we're close, you know. I wouldn't put it past him to, like, if you're trying to drag somebody's name through the mud, right? Because you're trying to separate yourself from them. You try to think of the most heinous acts you could possibly think of to really discredit them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things. It's like he basically he hated her at this point. So he just sort of like, I mean, okay, these are the men. Mark Smeaton, Sir Henry Norris, Sir Francis Weston, Sir William Brereton, Sir Thomas Wyatt, and George Boleyn. Like, that's quite George the gangbang.
Yeah, did she have one? Because that sounds like a fun time. Not with your brother.
Yeah.
Minus the
Not
brother.
With your brother. Minus the brother. And so
I have a son, but I don't know whose it is now. One of these guys. He's a sir, though. Unless he's my brother.
No, that's Lord. Her brother was Lord George Boleyn. So
okay, then he'd be a lord. Yeah.
But yeah, so she was found guilty. She spent her last days in the Tower, and a swordsman from France beheads her in 1536.
Oof,
she was 35.
What a rough way to go.
Now that's a really rough divorce.
Actually, it was a better way because an axeman would be harder. Like an axeman, like was famous for like not getting the trick done in one jab.
Yeah.
So like you could be there for a while the guy's just kind of like.
Yeah, weren't guillotines like more humane?
Yeah.
Because they're faster and they're sharper.
Like, yeah,
that's a lovely image.
Cut through your neck. Faster.
This is why we have trigger warnings.
Yep.
All right. Well, before we get back into the discussion tonight, here's the newsstand. Nationwide study on youth fertility, sexuality kicks off soon. The fifth installment of the Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Study, or YAFS, of the University of the Philippines Population Institute will kick off soon after the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, issued its approval. YAFS is a cross-sectional survey to generate comprehensive nationally representative data on the reproductive health indicators and sexual and non-sexual risk behaviors of young Filipino adults aged 15 to 24 years old. Objectives of the study are the analysis of pertinent demographic trends by comparing data results with the previous survey, to produce updated information on other equally relevant aspects of adolescent and young people's lives, to provide evidence-based information for pandemic-related policy and intervention targeting adolescent and young people, to potentially contribute to the assessment of previous and current youth-related government and non-government programs and initiatives, and the creation of new policies and interventions. Whoever is doing that, please stop. It's very distracting. YAFS will collect data from at least 14,000 Filipinos aged 15 to 24 years old and about 14,000 households nationwide from September 15 to November 2021. The results of the survey are scheduled for release in October 2022.
Awesome. It's really good that local governments are doing a survey to listen to the youth who are most impacted, I think, by our sexuality policies. But I hope they actually ask the right questions and that they listen and that they implement that. But this is a really good start. So good job on YAFS, YAFS, and the PSA.
Yeah, good job. Good job. I mean, it's a little, I think it's a little weird.
A little late.
Like, I wonder what the sexual habits of 15-year-olds are. But I mean, yeah, it's for a good cause, I suppose.
I mean, considering that the teen pregnancy and, like teen sexual activity rates here are incredibly high, I think it's absolutely necessary to talk to teens about their sexual activity because they are having sex. We had sex at that age. No one gave us a survey.
Yeah, I prefer that people were polling me at the time so they know just how much pussy I was getting, which is 0.
I was going to say, you guys were getting sex at 15? Jesus. I could
brag about how much of a fucking virgin I was.
I was the weird kid that liked encyclopedias. Like, I was like, yay.
Sex. Oh, yes. You mean copulation.
You remember that I was the kid that really enjoyed the Nerf guns and
yes, you're the person who took Austria and Germany hostage during their UN
I was
meeting.
the nerd kid. I was the nerd kid that was like, I'm going to take this stupid school assignment way too far.
And that was the newsstand. Now sitting down. Now on to the show.
All right. So earlier we talked about Anne Boleyn and I guess the history of the first divorce ever. And I'm not sure
ever.
Okay, fine.
But let's say the first divorced queen.
Yes. Okay. First divorced queen, and I guess probably paved the way for divorce for everybody else as well.
Probably
official institution.
The most anyone had ever worked to get a divorce up until that point. Just like go straight to the fucking public. Yo.
He literally separated from the church to make the Church of England just to marry her. So I guess
he made an entire religion Just
the C of E.
Say what you want about Anne Boleyn, but that must have been some bomb ass pussy. I'm just saying, you know, it must have been. She must have been extremely charming and beautiful.
She was very charming. She was supposedly not beautiful, but in the like, she was like striking in that like interesting to talk to, charming, interesting to hang out with, but not like the hottest one.
In the Natalie Dormer kind of way, where you're like,
like
she's hot.
No, Natalie Dormer is super hot.
What are you talking about?
Natalie Dormer is super hot. But so that's Anne Boleyn, who was and she supposedly learned French tricks is sometimes what people say about her, is that she learned tricks from the French court. Yes, because she grew up in the French court. So she learned French tricks.
The art of seduction and allure.
It's always France that like people are always like, oh, the art of seduction and allure. It's France or the Far East. It's always France or the Far East. One of those.
Yeah, because wasn't there like a French? Wasn't there like a French aristocrat who died getting a blowjob?
Yeah, I mean, probably.
Yeah, and it was in the news. Anyway, that's for a different episode.
Recently.
No. It was like way back when, like Philly dress times, I think.
Well, okay, so let's go to France. Our next mistress comes from France, so that works out pretty well. Woohoo! Transition.
I love it when it's so seamless you don't even notice.
As long as we keep mentioning it, it stays funny. So anyway, Madame de Pompadour was born in 1721 and died in 1764. What were we doing in the 1700s? Well, Gabriela Silang was active in 1763. So that was her rebellion in 1763. So this is almost lining up completely with the Madame de Pompadour in 1764. And where are we in poofy dress history, which is how we think about Western history? The West is in peak poofy dress history. This is the Louis we talk about is the grandfather of Louis XVI, which is even peaker poofier dresses. So these are those like poofy-esque Rococo dresses. Madame de Pompadour was born Jeanne Antoinette Poussin to Madeleine de la Motte, who was an adventureuse. So Jeanne Antoinette has a father on record, Francois Poisson, but Madame de la Motte had a couple of other lovers around that same time, so she's not like completely sure which one. That is. Yeah, it's a
Mamma Mia situation.
It's a Mamma Mia.
It's a Mamma Mia situation because it's three. And very quickly, Francois de Poisson abandons the family for Germany, and like one of the other ones, Charles de Normand de Tournem. His name is Le Normand de Tournem.
Yes, Charles de Normand.
Takes over as the like protector, basically. And so Jeanne was very well loved. She was called Rainette because a fortune teller had told her mother that she would one day rule or reign over the heart of the king. They were not noble, but they were very wealthy, and she was very well educated. So she had to learn how to draw, she had to learn how to paint, she had to learn how to play the harpsichord and stuff, like all the stuff that they taught women at the time. It's Madame de Pompadour. So she was still called Rainette at this time.
Do we get the Pompadour from her?
Like the hair?
What do you mean? The hair?
Do we get the hairstyle? Do we call it a Pompadour because from her?
Yeah, because of the like the poofs that they had, the hair. I think that's where it comes from. Okay, I would have to double check that because in my research that never came up, but they had poofy hair, so yeah, stands to reason.
Or she just wore it all the time. So they were like, "Hey, there's the Pompadour lady."
Well, she got the Pompadour later on. She got the title later on. Right now, she's still Rainette.
Okay.
And she's not that well known. Because like for a lot of the times, you can't really get well known until you're married. Like if you're unmarried, you can't really participate in French society. So in this case, she had to get married. So she gets married to Charles Guillaume Lenormand d'Etoile. And She promised to be faithful to him unless it was the king.
They also had
they have a celebrity list. Yeah, they had a hall pass list. And I guess you can't get bigger a celebrity than the king. It'd be like, I'll definitely fuck Brad Pitt if I saw Brad Pitt. You know what I mean? Like, that's always on, or whatever. But you're never going to meet that person. I guess if you're living there, you might actually see the king.
Yeah, so he was like, well, like, she lived at the edge of his hunting ground. So they were like, so she was like, okay, I could theoretically meet the king if I go out and like wear really fancy dresses. So I have here written, so homegirl planted herself in a conspicuous place and said sup 1700 style, which means to be conspicuous and intriguing.
So just basically hang around until they notice you.
Yeah, hang around until you're noticed. And it worked. The king sent her like venison and stuff.
Old school seduction was just like being weird enough for some dude to be like, hey, what's her deal?
Hey, if you think about it, modern dating rituals before the pandemic, you go to a bar and you wait for somebody to pick you up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I never waited. That had never happened. But, I guess. I don't know. It's pretty interesting. So she got venison out of it.
She got venison out of it. And then the king and her started to like see each other. And then the king and her started to like really see each other. So she had to go back to Charles Guillaume de Normand de Tol and was like,
it's happening, bro.
So the king kind of
remember that list we made?
You know how we had that like freebies list and mine was just the king?
Oh my god.
I'm gonna cash in on that.
That's like saying I'm going to make a hall pass list, but my hall pass list is our next door neighbor. You know what I mean? It's not really a hall pass list.
And so she became
our next door neighbor now.
And so she became the chief maîtresse or the maîtresse en titre. And so like this is an actual title that came with rooms and like she had to become noble. So they found her a title and that's how she got Madame de Pompadour, the Marquise de Pompadour, which was a title that wasn't being used. And
so it's a place.
So
gave her a brand new title.
But here's the thing. There's a lot of things about her that are really interesting and I want to go into it, but we have so much to go through. But one of the things that was really cool and really weird about her was that, so she was kind of cold by nature. So she and the king hit it off really well. They loved each other. And she decided that after a while they would become best friends. And she told everybody they weren't going to be lovers anymore. They were going to become best friends. And instead of having someone be her rival, she provided the king with like a little deer park, like a little house full of teenagers that the king could like play around with. And then she could be the mistress.
They just don't make women like that anymore, you know? You know what I mean?
And I would totally do this. Minus it was called the
Park All Surfs. And so she was just like Park All Surfs. Or the Deer Park.
O
Surfs. C-E-R-F. Surfs. Surfs. It's French.
Oh my god, a house of serfs. Okay, that's like a really demeaning thing to call your.
No, I mean it's the word for deer. So it's like it was literally the place where the deer. It was literally the park, the deer park house, and so she just used that house and like allowed him to have younger mistresses, and so that she wouldn't feel replaced. She would always have his ear. She would always be the best friend. She would always be the one with prominence, and then he could just play around with these girls in the Park of Serfs.
Smart.
Right. Keep him distracted while you wield the real power.
Yeah. Exactly. Because she was a very smart girl. She went to salons. She knew Voltaire.
Ooh, okay.
She was a very smart lady, but she was very cold by nature, according to her. She was just like not really a sexual person. And so I guess she wasn't jealous. Exactly. She wasn't jealous as long as the person wasn't going to be any sort of risk that they would usurp her in her position.
Because she provided them, so it's like...
Well, she more let it happen. Oh. She didn't really provide them. She more let it happen. She more was like, you can do this. Go ahead. Have your fun and then come back to me and we'll hang out.
And then we'll
she
hang
gets
out.
to have all the she gets to have all the fun parts.
Like,
Yeah,
I just don't want to
cool.
fuck you, dude. Get all the horniness out of your system. Come to me and talk when you're straight, and
Yeah.
I don't want to handle you when you're horny.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she passed away quite young of TB or lung cancer.
How
she
young
was
was
42.
She? Okay.
So so that was Madame de Pompadour. And now we'll go on to Gregory Potemkin, who was sort of around the same time, like living around the same time as Madame de Pompadour, 1739 to 1791. What were we doing in the 1700s? The galleon trade was up and running.
Nice.
So, yeah.
More
exploitation. And we're still in the midst of poofy dress history. So everyone's got big poofy dresses, the kind that you have to kind of turn to get into like any doors. Yeah.
Like the underwire around the butt?
Yes, exactly, with the underwire around the butt. The like layers and layers of petticoats that you just had to have with like whalebone and stuff to make these giant dresses. Okay, so we're now to Gregory Potemkin, who was born in Smolensk, which I only know about because I play a lot of Civ. And Smolensk is one of the like Russian cities that you play a lot in Civ.
There it is.
And yeah, so he was born in Smolensk, but he went to Moscow because he wanted to be a soldier. And he quickly became pretty prominent. And during Catherine the Great's big coup to take over Russia, he provided her with a sword knot. And so he was sort of like on the down low, like around Catherine, when he was sort of this like dashing soldier, just sort of like hanging out nearby, because Catherine is sort of the glittering. I need to do like a Catherine interlude. You can't talk about Potemkin without talking about Catherine. Catherine was the ruler of Russia from 1762 to 1796. She was 10 years older than Potemkin. Hello. And she married to Peter III, but overthrew him in a coup. She was enlightened and progressive. And apparently she and Potemkin were stupid cute. Just like passing notes to each other, like cutely, like talking to each other all the time, like giggling in the hallways. He would call her his little wife. She would call him his little husband, like that, like stupid cute. Dumb stuff. Wow. He would make her giggle and laugh and things like that. They may have even married in secret. And she paid all his gambling debts. But he was always a little bit insecure about the fact that she had all the power in the relationship. So after like 2 years of being together, they both kind of started to see younger people.
They both started to see younger people?
They both started to like look around a little bit because like Catherine was not a faithful person. So like even though she loved him, she would still sort of see other people. Like she would still see her exes from time to time, not necessarily romantically, but she would see them and she would talk to them and he would get so jealous and she would just be like, but you're my favorite. And he would be like, doesn't matter.
You're my favorite.
But you're my favorite. So they decided that they would become minister and queen rather than lovers. And this actually made them stronger again. So he would actually introduce young lovers to Catherine to be like, oh, I think you'd like this guy here. Oh, I think
you see a pattern here for some successful mistressing.
Yeah, I call it soulmates before wholemates.
I love that.
But yeah. So Potemkin was described as an able minister, a sublime politician, a profound philosopher, and a child of 10. So that was the kind of person he was. He was like crazy, but also just like smart, but also like a lot to deal with. Like I imagine him being a lot to deal with. So that was Gregory. Yeah, he was a handful, Gregory Potemkin. He was vain, but also glorious. He was a general in her army, but also like would also be so insecure about the fact that she was always going to be above him in the relationship. So like What do you do?
Boo-hoo.
So that's why he would just pimp out younger people to her.
Honestly, I like this whole setup. I think I'm just going to adopt a note from history and just funnel lovers towards my lovers. That's the secret
Just be
to
like,
a long, happy
just be the person
relationship.
that's just like, here, look, I found this person that I think you'd really like.
To be fair, that is how it operates.
You need to hang out with Janine a little bit more, all right? You need to incept this idea.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Okay.
So they're now looking for alternative lovers.
Yeah, that's where we are. They're looking for alternative lovers, and basically that's how they stay until Potemkin dies. They're just sort of friends until he dies, and Catherine just sort of has to deal with his death and moves on. But she never fucked a horse.
What?
Sorry, that's the thing
I'm
most
very
people
happy
know
you
about
clarified
Catherine. Yeah,
It's a little,
that's the thing most people know about
field.
Catherine. Oh, really? You've never heard the story?
The story of Mr. Hands?
With Catherine
the story of Catherine the Great and how her sexual appetite was so great that she needed to fuck a horse once. She never fucked a horse.
Yeah, I mean, like, why would you if you have your lover funneling other lovers to you?
Exactly. You have Potemkin. Why would you need
with
it?
my friends about which historical figures did or did not fuck a horse. And they bring up Catherine. I'll be like, nope, you guys are wrong.
Exactly.
Information I needed today.
So that's it for part.
Some people don't know.
Sorry. Yeah, so that's it for part 1 of the history of Mistresses and Mastresses. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2, where we'll talk about Mistresses in more recent memory. So stay tuned for that.
And I don't want to fall into deep. If I'm the only one, 'cause that's what I feel. So tell me why I'm waiting. Tell me why I'm here. Tell me
And that was Chimera by Yam. Yam is a storyteller. They produce ideas from their minds that are free from any confines and limitations, meaning they know no boundaries when it comes to ideas that are worth writing about. With these stories, Yam hopes to inspire people as much as their favorite artists inspired them. You can stream their music now on YouTube. I'm not laughing at your description. If the band is tuned in right now, I'm laughing because Trisha keeps clicking on the screen.
Sorry.
And there's just a little pink now open thing blocking certain words that I'm reading left and right.
I'm sorry.
I thought you were doing that on purpose because I asked you not to highlight things. Oh, okay. If you wanted to be featured on the show, we would be honored. Send your clips to nowopenph@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. My name's Drew.
My name is Jobim.
And my name is Sab.
Yeah, so joining us for this episode is historian, writer, sex comedian, and host of the history podcast, What's Up? It's Sab Schnabel.
What up?
All right, so what's up? So this week we continue our historical expose of the relationships that were a little more extra than marital. Here's part 2 of History of Mistresses and Mastresses. So in part 1, we discussed a few royal lovers whose affairs changed the world. This is part 2, where we'll talk about some of the most well-known modern mistresses and mastresses. Well, I think for this part, it's just mistresses. From the US to China to the Philippines.
Ooh.
So, we show up on here. Trigger warnings. We have so many kabets in here. So trigger warnings: kink, assault, violence, death, suicide, and drugs. And of course, cheating.
Yeah, so much cheating.
So much.
Although, okay, so in this next one, it's not so much cheating because it's not really cheating if you don't have the same sort of Western style marriage. And we're going to be talking about Suqi, who was the Dowager Empress of China in the Qing dynasty, so towards the end of the Chinese Empire. And so like this is towards the turn of the century. And so they weren't married the way that we think of marriage, where it's like a husband and a wife. The marriage of the emperor of China was like the emperor, his empress, and then the like concubines. There were like usually like 2 head concubines, and then or maybe 2 consorts, and then like 7 concubines, and then like below that there were the like sub concubines.
What?
Because the emperor had to spread his seed as far as he possibly could and had to have as many children as he could.
So their mistress system was far more sophisticated than in the Western world. The Western world was like, here, have a hut with some teenagers. They're like their caste systems. Titles.
And this and Suqi, who we'll mostly be talking about, had to go through all the different levels of the like. She started as noble lady Lan, and then got promoted, and then got promoted.
Like a league of mistresses.
Yep. Yeah.
More ideas.
So this was the 1800s. This is the 1800s. Here in the Philippines, this is the Ilustrado age, right as the Katipunan is bubbling up.
Mm-hmm.
And where we are in poofy dress history is that the dresses are still poofy, but mostly in the back. It's the back poofy dresses. You know what I mean? Not the side.
Party in the front. Sorry, business in the front, party in the back.
Business in the front, party in the back. And so Suqi was born. We're not really sure what her first name was. They think it was Qingzhen, and I'm going to get all of these wrong because I cannot pronounce Chinese to save my life. But she comes from a minor nobility, from a Manchu family. And she was chosen for Emperor Shanfeng's concubine selection. And she was called Noble Lady Lan, which means orchid, which she hated apparently. And what she did was she befriended the Empress Zhen. And Empress Zhen, spoiler alert, becomes Empress Xi'an. Yay! But that's later on. This friendship lasts throughout the years. So it's like Qi'an is the Empress. She's got more rank than Suqi. But Suqi and Qi'an just became friends. And because of that friendship, Suqi was able to do so much. And we're going to go through some of the stuff she did because she was very accomplished. She started as Noble Lady Lan, and then she was promoted to concubine Yi, and then she had a son. So, that's a big deal. So she was promoted again to consort Yi, and then noble consort Yi. But then Britain pushes into China, and so the court had to flee to Chengdu, which was a resort that was a safe amount of distance away. And the king starts to waste away because he's like supposed to be this emperor of heaven and all of that. And he's supposed to have the mandate of heaven. And here comes the British just taking over. And so he dies. Right. And his son is like 5.
Stress.
So he just
maybe
died.
I'm not like a god emperor after all. That kind of
exactly like
your confidence would kill you, I think.
Yeah, he dies, and he appoints 8 ministers to be like regents to his son, and then the coup of the dowagers happens. So the dowager empresses take over, and they start ruling behind the curtain. So they take over and rule for the Tongji emperor, and they rule behind a yellow curtain as regents for Shiqi's son. And as they're doing this, they're bringing China into the modern age, employing U.S. diplomats for rebranding and putting out reforms during the Second Opium War.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so Qi and Xi'an kind of worked together. So Xi'an did like finances and took care of the women's quarters and made sure everything in that side of the emperor, like of the royal the Forbidden Palace was taken care of, and Suchi was like the head of policy and foreign affairs and all of that stuff. And so they were like a power couple.
I love it.
Right? Like it was never about like sex with their husband or like sharing a husband. They wanted power and they took it. And I love it.
That's sexy.
I want to see this movie.
Yeah.
Right? And like there were so many different, so like Tongji, the emperor, actually dies at 23 of syphilis.
Oh damn.
And so
from the Westerners? Did the Westerners bring that too?
No. Well, the Westerners did bring syphilis, but he was also, let's just say he earned it.
Okay.
That's what my sources say. He earned it. And so they find another child to put on. So Empress Xuqi and Qian find another child to put on the throne so they can continue to rule this region. And they continue to do it until Xi'an dies of what we think of as a stroke. Although some people think that Chu Qi poisoned her, I don't think so.
Ooh.
Drama.
I don't think so. I think Chu Qi and Xi'an were like best friends, and if not lovers, I think they were best friends, and they would right? They could be lovers. We don't know.
That's my headcanon now.
Like, we don't know. They could there's nothing that says this. This is someone just mentioned it, and I was like, that's amazing. That should be everyone's headcanon.
There's no other truth. I'm sorry.
But yeah. And so like Shi-Chi was the queen and the empress during the 100 years of humiliation. So this is the part of Chinese history where the Boxer Rebellion fails, that there are 2 opium wars with China, and like China has to give concession to England and France and the US and Russia. And so there's a lot going on, and throughout all of this, it's a female emperor who's ruling behind the curtain. And she's like wielding all of this influence. And she was a concubine.
I've never heard of this woman. That's amazing.
Yeah,
she's like the Wizard of Oz of ancient China.
Not ancient. It's turn of the century.
Turn of the century China.
The other century.
Yeah. That's pretty bad.
Turn of the other century. Yeah. She's not always lauded because she had to like bring about the end. She brought about the end of the Qing dynasty because she kept putting children on the throne.
Right. Maybe not a great idea. But they look so cute. Look at him in his little emperor outfit.
Okay, no.
Stop putting babies on the throne.
There is actually a movie. I think it's called The Lost Kingdom or The Last Emperor, and it's of the last emperor who Shi put on the throne after she died, and his name is Pu Yi, and he's 3 years old, and he's so cute. He's so cute. He's just like a little baby emperor on the throne, just like, what's happening?
What is your first decree, Lord?
Why does that somehow seem less absurd than the government we have now?
Poo-poo.
Poo-poo now.
Already more coherent than our talk to the people addresses.
Yeah.
All right, who else do we got on the list for today?
We've got our last ones are Marilyn Monroe and Dovey Beams.
All right, let's talk about Marilyn.
Marilyn Monroe. She was actually surprised. So she was a big surprise to me. Marilyn is how much she actually went through. She was born in 1926, so this was in smack dab in the middle of our American period. And this is no more poofy dresses. This is flapper dresses. And her mom was a flapper. And her mom was also apparently a little bit disturbed. Like she had a little bit of mental illness, and so she couldn't take care of Norma Jean. Because Marilyn Monroe wasn't born Marilyn Monroe. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen or Norma Jean Baker. Some people we're not like completely sure which one she used. Her mom put in Mortensen. She used Baker. And she would bounce around a bunch of foster homes. until she was married at 16 to a man named James Doherty.
Holy crap.
And he went to war with the Merchant Marines. Yeah, so she actually got married, not because she wanted to get married, but more so she could sort of like stop being a ward of the state. She didn't want to be in an orphanage anymore.
Well, at the time, you didn't really have the option of work. It was get married or get fucked.
Yeah. She was either go to the orphanage, go through the foster system, or get married. So she got married. And she worked at a factory, and that's where she was discovered as a pinup model.
Does that even happen anymore?
No,
Do people get discovered in factories now?
I don't think you get discovered on. I think you get discovered on TikTok. Discovery.
Fair enough.
Discovery. I think you get discovered on TikTok, and that's like the way that it works now, which is really depressing. So she met a photographer and she became a pinup model, and nobody in her life liked the Hollywood lifestyle, and her husband gave her an ultimatum. It's me or the pictures, and she chose the pictures.
Tama behavior.
Yeah. So she separated with her husband, and she got a few good roles, but then they found her nudes. And they started to publish it, and you know what she said?
What did she say?
She said, "Tangina, I needed the money."
You know what? Fair. She worked in a factory.
Yeah, not joking. She literally was like, "I needed the money. I was behind on rent or car payments." And the reporters were like, "Did you have anything on? Did you have anything on, Marilyn?" And she said, "Why, yes, I had the radio on."
I'm sorry. That's just an amazing answer.
Oh my God, she's really good at answers like that. Where they're like, "What do you wear to bed, Marilyn?" She's like, "Why, Chanel number 5, of course."
No wonder she was such like a sex icon, because she was like brilliant, but like coy.
Yeah,
but
she was a lot smarter than people gave her credit for. And she's on this list because she was the kabit of JFK, and we'll get to that. But she was so much more interesting than like hanging out with JFK. And she passed away pretty early. So like, you know, she married Joe DiMaggio, who was a baseball player, and he was super not comfortable with her sexy image, and he apparently beat her, according to Amazon. Like, then she told somebody else that he beat her, and she had affairs with married men all the time.
I mean, why would you marry a bad bitch and then be mad she's a bad bitch?
Exactly. And like Joe DiMaggio continued to be affectionate towards her for the rest of her life. Like, even though that was just like a complicated relationship, but if he beat her, she left him, and that was the right thing to do. And then she married Arthur Miller, who was like a big deal writer and playwright. And then she finds his diary, and he's saying that he's disappointed in her and their life together, and finds her a dependent waif. And so she's like devastated. And so she starts having affairs, and he doesn't care. So they divorce, and this is 1960. And so on and off, she had like known JFK as when he was the senator in New York. So like I've heard accounts where they had known each other, and they had an affair when he was senator. But when he was president, the only day that they could probably have gotten together was March 24, 1962. And by this time, Marilyn was abusing barbiturates and amphetamines. It's possible she struggled with bipolar disorder, and she OD'd. Some people say suicide at 1930 when she was 36 in 1962.
Gone too soon.
Yeah, 36. Can you imagine?
I mean, considering the stage, like the state of Hollywood at the time, and all of her controversies, you know, like they treated her the way we treated Britney in the early 2000s.
Yeah, absolutely. They treated her terribly. And I mean, she was so good about her image and was so smart about how she wanted to like show herself and things like that. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, JFK was a slutty McSlutty slut.
Oh yeah, big slut.
Oh my God.
I think in general, the biggest sluts are typically presidents.
Oh, probably, but JFK in particular. So like he said that he would get a headache if he didn't get laid every day. And I was looking because like originally I was looking to see how many like people like I could just find from like just looking online of like list of JFK's list of JFK's various affairs, and it's literally like Mimi Alford, Blaise Starr, Diane DeVeg, Jill Cowan, Jane Mansfield, Marilyn Monroe, Kim Novak, Janet Leigh, Judith Exner, and those are just the ones that are named.
Oh my lord, he had a rotating harem apparently
he had a harem.
He had a harem and a half.
Yep. And so, yeah, so he was a slutty president. Speaking of slutty presidents, our final kabit for the night.
Before we go into our final kabit for the evening, let's go into our segment opening up. So for today's opening up, we have an anonymous letter. As usual, they write, I used to specialize, in quotation marks, in oral. But after a few health scares of enlarged lymph nodes and occasions of tonsillitis after giving head, I can't seem to get back into it. I tried giving head with a condom, but my partners tend to prefer oral without the condom, and they judge me for it. These days, even clinics advise condoms for oral. What should I do? Should I work towards doing it condomless or assert condom oral? I do love them flavored condoms, though. So that is what our anonymous letter writer writes for today's opening up. Sab, what do you think?
I think she should push for the condoms. I mean, if it's what she feels, what they feel most comfortable with. Sorry, I don't know why I used she. What they feel most comfortable with, and they love the smell. I mean, the feel of flavored condoms. Then go for it, and like, try and get your partners to like it because it's like it's your health. You don't want to mess with your health.
I understand it's very uncommon, especially for Filipinos, to experience using a condom during oral. I haven't slept with a man in a very long time, but I don't think I used condoms during oral at the time. And I don't know if the men I would have slept with would have been okay with that. But that's just going to happen. You know, you assert your boundaries regarding contraceptives, and some men are going to be like, nah. And that's fine. I hope you find sexual partners who are able to prioritize your sexual well-being, not just theirs, because the condom isn't just for them. It's for you. And if they want to have sex with you, this can be a rule that you have or a boundary. So I say assert with condoms. You want to protect yourself. Healthcare is very expensive, and unless they're paying for everything, condoms.
Yeah, I agree.
And they make delicious condoms now.
And I like what you said about, you know, healthcare is expensive. Healthcare is expensive. And so like if you're having problems with tonsillitis, use the condoms. Use the condoms.
Yeah, absolutely use the condoms. And you know, you can also incorporate it as part of play. You know, you put the condom on with your mouth. Never tried it. I do not know how easy or difficult it is, but it is a thing some people do. But you can just like make the condom a part of the act so that it doesn't feel very clinical or like a barrier, an obstacle to sexy fun times. That's, I guess, the advice I have for you if you still have people who are kind of hesitant about it. But I believe in you, and good job on giving good head. All right, so if you would like to send us your anonymous questions or confessions, you can submit through our opening up form, which you can find in our episode description, and I'm leaving it in the comments below. So let's get back to our discussion. So right before this, we were talking about Marilyn Monroe, one of the most famous presidential mistresses.
Yes, and now we're going to go to the most famous presidential mistress, at least from here, and that's Dovey Beams. Born 1932. What were we doing? Dovey Beams.
Colonized. Dovey Beams. Still getting colonized, apparently.
Still getting colonized. I mean, 1932
this
was entire period.
We've done several hundred years of this, and we're still being colonized at this point. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the colonization worked, right? So, yeah. This is us, Dovey Beams. Dovey. I keep saying Dovey. Dovey Beams had her affair with Marcos before martial law. And so this is no longer poofy dress history. It is poofy sleeve history. So we have
this is like sleeves. The 50s-ish.
Oh, no. This is
60s?
This is... Wait, hold on. I have a date. This is like 1968 to 1970. Their affair went from 1968 to 1970. And so basically when Marcos started, he wanted to gain favor right before running in 1965 with a movie called Iginuhit ng Tadhana. And so when he was running for a second term, he wanted to do it with another movie called Maharlika. And
Maharlika, famous Maharlika.
Yeah, it was to glorify his war exploits. And she would play his ka-love team, Evelyn Quezon, the Filipina. And Dovey Beams said she was 21 when she was 38 and was set up in a house when Marcos fell in love with her, was set up in a house near Wakwak where she was safely far away from Imelda. And Marcos could play the front nine, play with Dovey, and then play right back. So, yeah, Marcos.
Oh, I know that Marcos had a first wife, right?
Yes.
So was this before or after the first wife?
This was after the first wife. So the first wife, he actually changed religion because he used to be Aglipayan. He changed religion to marry Imelda, and then after marrying Imelda, he had affairs pretty often. But this affair went on for 2 years, 1968 to 1970. So that's why Imelda sort of got a little upset about it. And so Dovey Beams was an intellectual. She called him Freddie. And she hid a tape recorder under their bed. And that's why we know the famous tapes. And that's why we know all about Dovey Beams and what they did together, because she spread copies around.
You know what? Thank you, Dovey Beams, because we would not have known this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would not have had a copy of Ferdinand Marcos singing Pamulina when. Because that's apparently what he was saying.
While they were having sex, or just... That's my headcanon now. He's just thrusting before he comes and he's singing Pamulina when.
But yeah, so their exploits are outlined in a book called Marcos's Lovey-Dovey, which I haven't been able to get a hand on, but it's basically just transcripts that talked about like what they wanted to do together, what they wanted to be together. Apparently, they even wanted a kid, Lawin. It's just like stupid lovey-dovey stuff, lovey-dovey, as it were.
Do you think he called her that?
Oh man, I hope so.
Such a waste if he didn't.
I know. It's just perfectly done.
It's right there.
So yeah, that's Dovey Beams. She later in life was convicted of fraud in the United States and stealing millions of dollars, and died of complications of AIDS, HIV/AIDS.
Oh,
in 2017. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad she survived Marcos at least.
Yeah. Well, she did it with her own smarts and a tape recorder.
And it's a lot of courage. That requires a lot of bravery.
Yeah. And she was... Sorry, wait.
Go ahead.
No.
I was just going to wrap up, but if you have more.
No, we're good.
Okay. So that wraps up our discussions on the history of mistresses and mastresses. I want to ask Sab, if there's one thing you want our customers listening today to take away, what is it?
The traditional marriage is a contract between landowners, and that we should really start defining our own relationships and our own like connections the way we want to do it, rather than with the way that we think it should be done. Because sometimes things work, sometimes deer parks work, sometimes your relationship works better as a friendship, and sometimes even a friendship can trump other lovers, you know what I mean? So it's like relationships are weird and marriage is really weird. So extramarital affairs are not always what they seem.
Yeah, I think the idea of extramarital affairs is, I would say, slightly less weird than the idea of marriage. Because, like, I don't know, personally, it just makes more sense to me as like marriage as an institution, where it started as, you know, combining property, and then we somehow found our way into like marriage for love. And it's like these institutions aren't flexible. They're the same thing that they were roughly hundreds of years ago, and we're very different now. And even then, people were very different, and we're all adhering to these institutions. But it's really great to see how people throughout history have rebelled against those institutions. In some ways, they did work, as you said, where that's amazing. We should take notes from the people where it did work. And then sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you get beheaded. Sometimes you get beheaded. And that's not very fun.
That's what you're supposed to do with history. You're supposed to learn from it and take the stuff that take from the stuff that doesn't get you beheaded.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, like learn from the people who didn't get beheaded, and reevaluate your relationship, see if it's working for you. Somebody made an entirely different religion, literally just to have the relationship that he wanted. So who's to say that you can't have the relationship that you want with a little bit of effort?
Absolutely.
All right. So thank you so much, Sab. It was a really illuminating episode, and honestly, we would love to have you back for anything you want.
Oh my God. I love coming on here. So whatever you guys want, I'm here. I'm here for it.
So would you like to promote anything?
So I would like to promote my podcast, WhatsApp, Araling Panlipunan Rebooted. We just came out with a new episode, Bakuna Matata, that's all about vaccines and the Balmese expedition. Yes.
I like the name.
And so that just came out today. You can get that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Awesome.
So that's my big push.
All right, and I am at Trisha O'Bannon on Twitter. So make sure to stay updated with Now Open by following us on Facebook and Twitter. That's at NowOpenPH. Our past episodes are also available on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcasts. That's really the verbiage, no? That we all use across the board, wherever else you get your podcasts.
Wherever else you get your podcasts.
Yeah. And don't forget to subscribe to our coffee page. That's www.coffee.com/NowOpenPH to get bonus content and other special perks. We have our behind the scenes pre-show up on our coffee, and we are releasing merch very soon. And if you subscribe to our coffee as a monthly customer, then you can get a 20% discount on our merch store. So stay tuned for more news about that. And if you'd like to keep the conversation going, we're having a lot of fun here. We'll be migrating over to Now Open's Gather Town after the end of the show. So we'll be there right after this. You don't have to download anything. You can just click on a link, join us, hang out, talk about the episode, talk about anything at all.
Ask me questions.
Yes. Anything you want, really. Just chill with the crew and other customers. So really excited to announce next week's episode. So our next episode, same time, same place, we're going to be talking about eating the bean, aka giving good head. So if you've ever wondered what you're doing wrong down there, then you should listen into next week's episode, because we're going to have a ton of insight from people with vaginas, people with penises, and everything across the board. So yeah, see y'all when we next open.